Rainer Münz, you've been observing global migration trends during the past few decades. What have you observed?
The first trend is an older one, which means that certain emigration countries, particularly those of Europe, have turned to immigration countries, say some 30 or 40 years ago. Over the course of the last 25 years, we have seen a surge in international migration by about 50%, which means an additional maybe 80 million migrants that we have today compared to the year 1990. The total number is 232 million people who do not live in their country of birth. And the largest increase has been observed in people moving from the global south to the global north, which means from low and middle income countries to high income countries.
When looking at the future of migratory flows, what can we expect? What are the trends that you're predicting?
The future of international migration will probably look a bit different when it comes to geography, because we have today aging societies in Europe or North America and Japan, but we will have countries like China entering the same demographic stage quite soon, which means that the number of people on the labor market in China will not increase but decrease in the future, which might make China a competitor on the global search for talent and skills, competing with Europe, competing with North America. Today, China is one of the main sending countries, and this will come to an end like it has come to an end in Italy or in Great Britain or in Spain a generation ago. The other main change may come from a difference in economic growth, because in the past economic growth was mainly concentrated in the more developed countries, whereas in recent years we have seen growth rather taking place in emerging markets. And if this would continue, something that we don't know yet, it would have implications for international migration, because above a certain threshold, which is around $10,000 a year in GDP per capita, people no longer leave countries in large numbers. So if more countries would move into this range above 10,000 US dollars in GDP per capita, we might also see fewer migrants coming from these countries.
What about Europe specifically? What are the potential risks to the European economy?
Europe has the oldest population globally speaking, together with Japan. Europe is the first continent where population decline sets in. We already see it in a couple of countries, and this will continue. So the future of European population growth or decline will largely depend on international migration. And at the same time, over the last 5 or 6 years, Europe was the part of the world with very anemic economic growth or even recession. Other parts of the world came out of the crisis more quickly. So we have to ask ourselves, will an aging, graying, and economically not growing Europe be attractive for the best and brightest in the world whom we would like to convince to come to Europe?
Taking all that into account, what are you proposing to policymakers?
Migration and economic growth are intertwined. And at the same time, migration is the quickest way for people to lift themselves out of poverty, but also being able to send money back home, which also helps the sending communities at the same time. So there is a general economic incentive to migrate for people who think they can improve their standard of living or become more independent economically. So this will continue. Now the question is, will these people come to Europe? And in order to make it easier for them and more attractive, Europe will probably have to think about smarter migration policies, which means a more generous offer when it comes to admission, but also recognition of acquired skills, a higher degree of portability of acquired rights and benefits when it comes to social welfare, and so on. That's for the longer view. There is also a shorter perspective. When we look at high unemployment in countries of the European South, but also in places like Ireland, and at the same time an already existing shortage of labor and skills for example, in parts of West Germany or in Austria or Switzerland, we think we would need more mobility within Europe, make it easier and more attractive for people who don't find a job in Spain or Portugal or Greece. I mean, just making it more plausible that they should be looking abroad for a possibility to earn a decent living. There are not enough people mobile within Europe. It's just 2% of the total EU population that has moved from one EU member state to another EU member state.